Patterns are a huge part of our music and especially of the music that we improvise. There is several good reasons for that, and therefore I think these are very handy to know. Unfortunately, there is also a few downsides, and if you want to use pattern in your playing with a musical outcome, then I think you should know about the pros and cons of those. So one thing that is definitely a pro is our ear likes it if it can recognize pattern in the playing. If you would produce random notes with no logical order, it would probably sound weird and hard to follow. So if we do something that the listener can recognize, he can relate to it and therefore probably like the melody more. Also, another thing is that patterns are something that we can learn easily and we can remember them, and then we already have a good starting point, for example, for our solo. There's also an almost infinite number of possibilities to combine pattern or to produce pattern, from very, very simple ones that you will hear in a few minutes or rather complex ones. You can use them to create melodies, but you can also use them for, let's say, rhythm exercises or rhythm patterns that are not entirely focused on notes, and also for comping. Another point which is really positive is that you will get a better knowledge of the notes and of your instrument and how the notes sound, let's say, over a chord. But there are also a few downsides, and these are very, let's say, dangerous. I think we all have heard a player that overuses pattern. And that sounds very mechanical and almost like a computer making music, like a programmed music, and very unnatural. And that is a huge problem and something you should definitely look out for, that it does not happen in your music. So a few things you could do to improve the use of patterns, which I described in my book, are, for example, use dynamics and the right articulation in these patterns. Generally, these patterns are, let's say, a digital pattern is something that is explainable with numbers or a mathematical formula. To give you an example, it could probably look something like this. The easiest one would maybe be something like that, and the formula would be +1. So you start somewhere and you go maybe 1 + 1 makes 2 + 1 makes 3, and so on. Another possibility, which is slightly more complicated, would, for example, be this. And the formula for that one would be +2 - 1. So you start somewhere, you go up 2, you go back 1, you go up 2, back 1, up 2, and so on. Also, this one, I'm pretty sure if you play it, would be a pattern that you recognize very soon because it is used a lot of times. Now the problem, like I said, is if you just use this pattern and you stop playing and you use another pattern and you stop playing and you use another pattern and you stop playing and so on, it sounds unnatural and mechanical. So the most important thing, one of the most important thing with pattern is, at first, use dynamics and articulation to bring your pattern to life. And second, do not overuse them, or at least try to put them into your music in a natural way. And what I mean is, you play a pattern, but before and after the pattern, you try to make something very musical. So like something like a small phrase in the beginning, which starts your whole musical idea, and that naturally leads into your pattern. And from the last note of your pattern, you would go in a musical motive that ends your whole phrase, which is this. And this phrase is now much more likely to sound natural, especially if you plan to use another pattern very soon. So the first pattern is a very basic one, and I guess probably most of you know it already. It's just an ascending line made out of diatonic thirds. And that sounds basically like this. The second one is pretty similar to that, and it is made out of diatonic triads. You can play them in different ways. I will play it like this. So if you do not use your small, I call it upbeat, or a tiny lick, or another motive that leads into the pattern, and something that ends your pattern naturally and musically, then you just have a pattern left, and it starts somewhere and stops somewhere, and that is very unnatural. The third one is played in the basic pentatonic shape, and it's made out of triplets, and it's also a ascending line and sounds like this. A lot of players do so, and that's why one chapter of my book is about how you can create pattern, and there I show different possibilities how you can come up with your own pattern. But also in this chapter, a huge part is what you do before and after your patterns, or even what you can do if you want to use more than one pattern in one phrase and how to connect them in a natural and musical way. Another one that sounds pretty cool is one that uses string skipping, and it goes like this. You play the scale and you jump one string to the highest one, and then you go back to your third string. And you always play 3 notes on the G string and then 1 on the E string, and you go back to the G string like this. One pattern that is pretty cool can also be played in different ways, and I will show 2 different examples, and that is basically just playing fifth. So you could do this. For example, what I like to do is to play it on the high strings like this. Or in a scale on different strings like this.